All right, good evening. This is Laurie Wondra with YourLifeCore. Joining me tonight is Mark Griffon with Sedona Mystical Tours. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Laurie.
So it is a highly charged evening again. I want to thank you again for being with me. And tonight our topic is going to be the collective conscious energy, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about. Of course, energy is one of my favorite things to talk about and to teach about. And there's just been a lot of world events recently that we thought this would be a really good topic for us to talk about. And before we jump into that, I always like to just touch base with you on where the planets are. And so right before this call, we talked about Jupiter went direct last weekend, May 8th or 9th. And for me personally, I'm experiencing this incredible time of expansion and busyness, and clients are asking for more help, or my business is more busy, and my consulting and corporate is more busy. So I'm getting more of more. Does that make sense?
It does. It's happening to everyone over here, too.
So, and then you also mentioned that we've got Mercury is going direct also soon, so that should help in our communication and electronics and travel and some of those things that people have been experiencing some snafus in those areas. And that one goes direct. Is that like the 23rd, May 23rd, or somewhere around there?
Yeah.
I think it's
okay. It's going to be around this weekend. But what a lot of us have been feeling is with the 5 retrograde planets. It's been a kind of an irritating sense because you don't seem like you can get as much done as you need to or want to, and it's almost like we were driving with the park brake on for the last 3 weeks. So as they move forward,
I would agree with that. And in my life, I go at a pretty fast pace all the time, and so suddenly when things aren't moving at that pace, it just feels wrong or off, or I'm just not firing in all cylinders. So I will be happy when these planets go direct again. But they're always, I want to remind our listeners that there's always with purpose that they go retrograde. They're always helpful for us to do some internal work, and so a lot of people, and I hear this through my clients. I see patterns and commonalities between the groups that I work with or the clients that I see is people are doing a lot of inner deep work, and that's also important for the collective conscious energy, because the more work that we do as individuals, we're contributing to the collective consciousness doing the work. Does that make sense?
No, that's exactly what will be happening, what is happening. And we are in a kind of a new paradigm since 2012, and it really is as we shift our, we don't want to just call it consciousness, but we shift our approach, our perceptions of what we're seeing in the world and how it affects us. That in turn is feeding back into that collective energy, and it's making it a little less judgmental, a little less critical, a little less self-denying, and more self-accepting, more self-love. So, this collective energy, we really hadn't started into it, but the planetary influences, they add, at times when they're aspecting, they add more impact on the collective, because right now we have a combination of a grand trine. We have Jupiter, Pluto, and all these planets moving through Taurus. That's a kind of a flowing energy of the planets in Earth signs. And then we have, at the same time, more of a resisting, challenging, and demanding combination of planets in the mutable signs. Both Jupiter is again influenced, Neptune and Saturn. So it's considered a T-square, a tension square. So that adds to what we've been feeling with the retrogrades. We got this underlying sense of a tension, a nervous energy that doesn't seem to know what to do or where to go, and the essence of wanting to really manifest things. And maybe a lot of people have noticed that they're intentions and thoughts are manifesting quicker, and that would be because of that grind trine in the earth signs.
Yeah. And that's manifesting the good and the not so good. And I remind people that every manifestation is a good thing because it allows us to see what we manifested or what intents or what focus we put out to the universe. The universe delivers back to us in a manifestation of some sort. And if it's not what we like, then we readjust again, and set our intents and focus again. And it's that iterative process that we go through. It's not just a one-time thing. And when you were talking about all these planets being retrograde or in T-square, I think that's a perfect time that the universe kind of pauses or allows us to reassess exactly what did we get back, or what are we manifesting, and is it really what we want, or is it what we asked but we really don't want that? So I look at that as the gift from the universe of just forcing us to slow down, as painful as it can be for sometimes.
Exactly. That's exactly what they do, and their purpose of, in a sense, providing that to the collective is slowing the pace of the technological, in a sense, maddening lifestyles we have.
Yeah. I want to go back to, I want to dive into talking about the collective consciousness and the energy behind that. And you touched on the perceptions. What I'm loving about the energy that I'm feeling, a lot of the Venus energy and the Pluto influence is about death and rebirth. And what I'm experiencing with those around me, and even some with myself, is just the kindness that people have in how they view others around. And I think that's a touch point on that perception. It's like our perception of how people are acting through this time period, or how they are responding to us. Our perceptions of what should be or shouldn't be just feel gentler or softer, or we're more bending. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, because we've been worn down. It's because
we're just tired.
Yeah, the planet you mentioned, there's been an aspect with Uranus for 3 years now. And so it's like a slow grinding process. And once again, these are collective consciousness energies coming from really slow moving planets. And so we're just, I think maybe a good example would be, you look at all these very ugly events that keep happening in the world, and we keep getting exposed to if we watch the news. And some, and I'm hearing this because I'm dealing with people from all over the country. More and more people are just stopping the process of watching the news because they just realize it's just programming to keep us in fear and stress. So that's an example. It's a slow grind. Okay, we all have these low points or saturation points where we just can't take it anymore. And, we're talking about the positive influence of a harsh planetary aspect. Well, that would be the positive influence is this. It's grinding away to, get us to change. And a lot of people have high thresholds for discomfort and pain, and so it takes them longer. And the sensitive people really don't like being in discomfort for too long, so they're going to change quicker or earlier on. But eventually everyone will decide that it's fruitless and pointless to just be constantly judging, critiquing, and evaluating what other people do with their lives. And it's bringing us into looking at how we function within ourselves.
So that goes right with the moving with what feels right, or what feels that we're in the flow. And we've talked about that many times in the past, is that if we're not in the flow, then we start feeling that static, or we start feeling drag or a toe or an anchor to us. But if we move to what feels right or feels comfortable or alleviates that stress or that pain, then we can more easily get back in the flow. So it's not about giving up. I don't want our listeners to hear us speak about this as we're getting worn down so we give up. It is about learning how to be back in that flow, learning about our feelings, actually feeling our feelings, and letting go of the things that cause that angst and that stress and that pressure.
Yeah.
I see that. I see that a lot in people that come to me about relationships or about jobs or work that is just not working for them. They're feeling just overwhelmed and worn out. And I can see it in their energy field. I can hear it in their voices. I can pick it up in the physical stuff that I pick up about what's going on in their physical bodies. And so it is about getting back in the flow. And as a part of the collective, it's important that we do get back in the flow, because then we can more easily use the other patternings and energies of all the other humans that are also in this higher frequency or this higher flow of energy. I always say I don't mind meditating myself. I love to, be out in nature, meditate myself. But if I'm in a group meditation or if I'm doing a group session, because there are so many others that are at this higher frequency, it just makes it easier for all of us. And so I look at that collective consciousness being in the flow of good consciousness or higher consciousness just makes it easier for the individual.
It does.
But we have to contribute. We have to be one of those high frequency to contribute to that, to even get into that flow.
Yes.
So let's talk about, some of the laws of the universe that I just, over the years, I know you and I have talked about Einstein's theories of his magnetic theory, that we're human magnets and we draw to us. He was like the basis of some of the law of attraction work that began, that we draw to us as we are human magnets. But then there's the law of more equals more. So if I'm in a higher frequency, I'm just going to gather more higher frequency to me. Is that true?
I would agree, just, based on my personal observations of self, in my observations of people that I have seen in this environment called Sedona, and of course interacting with people from around the country. I think it's under the law of magnetism, mm-hmm. where we could, as a healer, you could radiate or be magnetic, and so with being in the flow, you're attracting, if you want to call it, with that magnetic energy, a sequence of events that leads to our highest good, our divine purpose, or our purpose in life. And you just, continually think along those lines. And so even if it seems like it's an inconvenience, you get a schedule get changed, your day gets disrupted, that flow will lead to something that's more prosperous, more beneficial for you. And you begin to consciously shift that and look at it from that perspective. And somehow, just that little drop into the ocean of the collective energy will cause somebody else somewhere to start having that same approach. And, bit by bit, the paradigms of having to have everything structured and go a particular mechanical, orthodox way of life, it moves slowly into the flow. And I live in a community where the flow is far more common than probably most other places in the country, and it's real easy to see that.
Mm-hmm. What comes to mind as you're talking about is in Minnesota here in the Twin Cities area, rush hour is just chaotic, as is any large city. And one of the most recent talks that I did was about, what can you do in traffic to alleviate that stress? And one is just to let go. And as you talk about being in the flow, what comes to mind, one of the practices that I do is I always look at it as a gift of time. So I'll shut off my radio and I'll just spend that time thinking, or I don't want to say meditating because I don't want to meditate while I'm driving, but it's that quiet time. And rather than being stressed out about being late or missing something, it's like, what's the purpose? What is the opportunity that the universe is presenting to me now, that the universe has decided I need this time in my car, this quiet time, versus I got to get to the office. And I think that's what you're touching on, is like when you look at the gift that is given to you each time what you thought was going to happen shifts. It's a gift. then you start seeing those gifts as purposeful, meaningful, and you start picking up the messages of the universe. And then also in your mood, your own mood shifting, you're contributing back to the collective consciousness for, let's say in my case, other drivers that are on the road or other people that may be stressed out in the morning, or just contributing to the general overall gentleness of the energy that might be felt in the morning hours.
I used to have to do that for a living when I was in California in the Bay Area. And, I had to develop tricks tricks to keep me calm. And it would be a variety of things, but essentially it was keeping the mental activity, my mental activity away from the fact that I was stuck in traffic. And you could be doing these types of things anywhere. I know you said you don't want to get too much into a trance state, but
right.
One of the things I learned, because I'm an energy sensitive person, and I realized the reason why rush hour traffic is so stressful is because we're going into each other's energy field as we're slowly progressing bit by bit. And a lot of times you'll see traffic slow down for no reason at a particular area, and then you're looking around going, well, where's the accident? And nothing's there.
That's absolutely right. And as light workers, our energy fields are so expanded that you can pass that gentleness, or you pass that flow outward, and make that drive easier or less stressful for people that are in 3 traffic lanes over from you. So you're absolutely right. We're bumping into each other's energy fields. We're in that space. There's no longer such separation because the energy fields are expanding.
Yes. And, the influences of the collective are, I'm personally question is, and, we've talked about it, is as we become more expansive with our aura, grid and aura, if we're feeling the collective more, or if the electromagnetic influences that are everywhere now are coming into us more strongly. It's hard to say which one is stronger, but I tend to feel the electromagnetic environments we've created are going, it's creating these waves in the ionosphere which go into our neurons and affect our brainwave activity. So that in itself makes it harder and harder to, kind of stay focused and relaxed and at peace within yourself. Well, how do you feel about that?
I would agree with that. And electronics, it's very difficult to be in a space unless you're out in nature and you've left your phone or you left the technology in the vehicle. It's very difficult to be in space that you're not bumping into or bouncing into other electromagnetic field. I was out for an early morning walk and left my phone at home and just was trying to see what could I feel, what could I just pick up. I didn't have any electronics on my body, but just in the neighborhood or as people were waking up and getting going, I could feel the buzz that was around me. And then, of course, I started noticing, power lines and other things around me. So it is more difficult to get away from that, which means that we have to have more solid practices to be in our space and to clear any energy field or any energy that's really not ours.
Yes. Now, we're still talking about, the collective energy. Some of the things I've recently have learned has a different approach or a different perspective is that the ego goes in 2 directions when it comes to interacting with others and the external environment. It either thinks that it's better than everything else, or the energy sensitive types tend to think that they're less than what's taking place around them, and then that causes us to be more strongly affected because of that fact. The ego's almost making us feel like we need to have more empathy and connection with the struggles that we see externally in the world and in our immediate environment. And the change of the approach is to just start realizing that we could send out like a positive blessing energy of thought to whatever is occurring, even if it looks very harsh, because that's one way we individually can start changing that the matrix, the paradigm matrix of what humanity has been facing, and how we constantly are feeding stress into the collective environment versus sending peace and calmness into the collective environment.
It's taking that accountability for not just yourself, but knowing that you have accountability to the collective. So as you say, the ego goes in two ways. It goes, am I better or am I less than? What I would say to that is I would ask our listeners to first notice the ego. Notice that you're judging yourself. Notice that you have this feeling of more or less, and let that go. Because then that lets go of that ego having to act on anything other than just simply allowing it. And that puts you in that space of allowing love to go out more freely. Sometimes I've had clients say that they find it very, very difficult to push love out into a situation where they have such an emotional reaction to. And I tell them that's where their ego is still engaged in that you have to just let the ego be.
Yeah.
Let it acknowledge it, let it be, but then you can put another emotion into that, whether it's compassion or love or joy, whatever that is. But you have to first let go of the judgment part of it.
Yeah, and our mutual friend Matt Kahn, he had a really great explanation about the self-love. We have this debit of unloving ourselves. Well, we could also have a debit of not loving others, other experiences, what other people are doing with their lives. So even if it doesn't feel genuine, you have to realize that constantly projecting it and having that thought and that even that oral, verbal intention that I'm sending my blessings out to the knuckleheads that are stuck in traffic in front of me, it just somehow slowly chisels away and helps. And and then your subconscious at some point accepts that you really mean that. But until you go to the gym and you start working out, you're not going to be in shape. And it's the same way with the subconscious. And until you start reprogramming it, it's going to hold on to those old patterns.
Right. And the old patterns, I mean, they're gonna come up. They're gonna rear their ugly head, and it's gonna take some time. Another one of the laws of the universe that I wanted to talk about that I jotted down here tonight was the law of equals, and because so many of us, so many feel that we have to always be in the state of light or always be in the state of happiness or always be in the state of love, that it always has to be on the good side. But the reality is one of the laws is laws of equals, that just says a negative has to have a balance of light. So therefore, light has to have a balance of negative. And so and I'm just wondering your thoughts on that, because if I just break that down, to me, that's so much what we're experiencing in the world. Is you have all this emergence of light workers and healers and people speaking and wanting to move in that direction of shedding love and light, but then there's this huge parts of the world that are still in war and darkness, and it for some it doesn't feel like that's ever going to go away, but to me that's still part of this laws of equal that we're battling through, or that we're trying to get back into balance. So you have any thoughts on that?
I do. It's hard. I'm trying to express it in a simple way, because that's a type of a experience that for me it's very kinesthetic, and I'm a kind of, I don't want to say a believer, but I understand I'm a transmuter. My natural dynamic composition is to transmute and even transform.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would almost take that example of the polar opposites of we can begin to transmute the polar opposite of, let's just say, goodness, of divine love and compassion. And since divine love is an energy, not an emotion, it can transform anything. And I think it will, that's maybe one of the new paradigms, is that can come through and kind of bring more of a harmony between those polar opposite energies. But it's just a theory, and I think I'm just practicing that in my internal dialogue and my internal thoughts and seeing the results. Because I could see the ego coming in and wanting to go back to the old paradigm of, good and bad, right and wrong, which we're really not meant to have that type of a mindset, because what one person's right is or wrong is another person's right, and it goes back and forth. You don't really know if what's happening is really wrong, if that's right, destined for the person to experience or destined for you to experience.
That's absolutely right. My personal feeling is that as more light comes in, there's more balance, so that the spikes between the light and the dark, or the spikes between those opposites, aren't so harsh. There's more of a balance, and there's more of an acceptance. And I'm not saying that, we have to accept war and world atrocities, but I'm saying that there's when you bring more light into that darkness, you get more in that gray area, and things become more balanced. And I honestly believe that's where we're moving, is by bringing all this light in. It's trying to bring that starkness that we're feeling, or those devastations that are happening, soften those, have them happen less, move them more into the gray area, so that they can come more towards the light versus being such in that dark place.
No, that's I think a very good way of describing it. And just like we carry, if you want to say, karmic patterns from one lifetime to another, collectively there's karmic patterns that just continually get carried until it gets transformed as well. So your explanation of what is taking place coming in through us lightens and puts these harsh events into grayness, so that the next year and the next generational cycle transforms that grayness into more light. And at one point, the need to, let's say, have war as a resolution of conflict will no longer exist. But one by one, everybody has to accept that this is the way to go. And of course, there's elements in our culture or corporate structure that make a lot of money from these conflicts. And so you really start wrapping your head around things and go, well, geez, how much of this is being really, how much of it is really a manipulative thing versus an actual organic experience?
Right. That experience, I had a dream a while back. I was in school. I was studying, I don't know if it was psychology or sociology, but it was the time we studied about, group think. And do you ever remember doing experiments or reading about the studies that were done, like in the 1950s about groupthink and the impacts of society when, you had a few leaders that moved everybody in one direction, and how I relate that, I woke up thinking, I actually journaled about it, is that, in a way that's what we're talking about from a collective standpoint, but it's a new collective. It's a new way of being. It's not the group think. It's more of the group energy. It's our feelings and our emotions and our love that's really changing without even having to say anything. So was just wondering about your thoughts on that.
No, it is a dynamic that has, I think, been clearly seen, or is clearly evident since the 2012 calendar ending. Each year since then has been kind of revolutionary as far as how interactive we are, and how the energies of one person or an area can affect the energy of the whole. And it's just, the planets that are involved are kind of indicative of this. But it's really meant to be the internal revolution that creates the external change. And so the group think was more like a Pavlovian response in the old days, and now it's more like the group interaction.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I want to talk about some recent events that are really demonstrative of the collective consciousness, where there's been some world events that people just reacted out of the ordinary. And recently in Minnesota, we lost Prince. who passed away recently. And in his passing, the outpouring of love from around the globe was amazing. I mean, you could feel it here in Minnesota in the Twin Cities. And I had numerous people from out of state just ask me, what's the mood feel like? What does it feel like here? And the energy was very heavy. It was very sad, but yet there was this immense feeling of love and compassion and mixed in with the sadness. And I look at that as one of those global, those world events that time or this time has been a pure example of collective consciousness. All the energy is directed in this one way or one direction, moving in one direction, and we could all feel it. And there's been a few times in history, I know in my lifetime, where I've felt this too, but this one was just really to the magnitude of so intense that it really topped any of those previous ones that maybe I experienced.
Yeah, I totally agree, and we've been experiencing that in the last 6 months with some of these other major artists that have passed. I think the difference may have been with Prince is that he was still, a performer. He was still vibrant with his creativity, and also we all thought he took such great care of himself. The last thing we figured was he would be the one to leave. It was just, I think, it was something that we couldn't accept. It was difficult to think that somebody who was so spiritual would have an issue with what he had, and I think that was part of the sadness. And he expressed really divine energy. He even mentioned the sound frequencies he used all his music on was more the love vibration. And it's also showing you these individuals who are bringing in creative energy, light energy, if you want to call it that, how their influence is so much stronger than an individual who was only concerned with self and not with the collective. He was obviously very, very concerned with the collective energies and the influences that his music had on people.
He did. He really, even from doing battle with some of the record companies at the time to retain his rights to his music. I mean, he spoke out, so he was a voice for a lot of artists before the artists even knew they needed a voice. So he was on the front of that. And you mentioned the music that he played to, the 432 hertz, and most musicians record at 440 hertz, and he recorded at 432. And you and I both had the opportunity to work with a musical producer there in Sedona, so that's where I learned all about the programming and the frequency that can be put into some of the music that's more spiritual in nature or more aligns with the solfeggio scale and the dynamics of our energy fields. But not a lot of artists would speak about that, and Prince would openly speak about the heart hertz and the frequencies that were in music, and would point people to the scientific pages that would the website pages that would explain what this vibrational frequency was. And for me, that was very exciting because, as my listeners know, I've been dealing with energy since I've been born, and so anybody that can tie that together with a science fact is just another voice out to the world to bring explanation to what we feel in that. So very, very healing in his words and in his music and just how he presented himself. So yeah, that's a sad one. But there are a lot of artists that have left recently, and some of them have, it's sad, but they have not generated the collective heartfelt energy that maybe Princess Di was another energy that we lost, and I think she passed away in 1997. That I remember the collective energy. It's like the world was mourning her energy at that time.
Because we missed it. If maybe, these individuals, they weren't just contributing a few grains of sand into the beach. They were bringing a truckload of sand into the beach. And that's why when they leave, we feel like we have lost something.
Right. Right. And I remember at the time Princess Diana died, Mother Teresa died like a week after. And there was publicity about Mother Teresa passing, but it did not have the same energy from the world, from the collective consciousness, as Princess Diana did. And so I remember at that time, and that was way back in 1997, but I remember doing some meditations on that as just, why one, not the other, where they both had such intense global presence, but it was the energy that they were also bringing out into the world in very different ways. So.
Well, it's that magnetism versus radiating energy, the two forms of healing. So Mother Teresa was more magnetic, where she drew things in and nurtured.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Princess Diana, Michael Jackson, Prince, David Bowie, they were radiators. Mm-hmm. They could walk in a room in a costume and you would still feel their presence.
Absolutely. And that's a good way to term that, is that generated that energy and then radiated that outward. So very, very amazing.
Yeah.
And touching back on where more people are choosing to turn off the news, if we look at the negative influences that we have, the more that we stay away from those types of energy, the more we can shut down, or we can not give our energy to those episodes and give our energy to those things that move us in that more generating standpoint.
Well, that particular example, because I hear it so often, and most of my colleagues and friends here don't watch the news, it's not that you're not staying abreast of events taking place in the world. You're not letting the news programming affect how you view them. So, like the Paris attacks last year, it didn't bother me at all, because I heard it once on the radio and I didn't feed into it. I didn't try to follow up on, all the other things that were going on, yet I watched other people were getting extremely angry, upset. That felt like they were in victim consciousness. And so being aware of the event allows you to send a blessing, in a sense, to it, send grace to it, acknowledge that it happened, but not to allow it to bring you into victim or bring you into righteousness. And when we get programmed with news, unfortunately, even NPR, where you're constantly being told all these rough, harsh stories on the hour, sometimes for the entire hour, it's hard to feel in a positive vibe. So we need to just acknowledge these things are happening. Somebody gets shot in a shopping mall or at a church. You just acknowledge it. We kind of bless it, because what we're doing, this is like laws of physics. We're altering the molecular structure of that event so it doesn't get repeated. Uh-huh. And it doesn't, the news programming is wanting to continue this molecular structure of fear and stress and dependency on an authority, in a sense. And we're wanting to become sovereign. And so what we want to do is we want to send out the blessing energy. We're letting the divine love or compassion flow through us, and we want to send it out to the person, the event, anything involved with what has occurred, and leave it as almost like a neutral state, so that we're not pulling it into us empathically or sympathetically. And then all of a sudden our ego is going, you don't feel very good about yourself, and here's reasons why. Look at all these external events that are happening. And so it can bring us down further than if we just simply say we have a God presence that can bring some harmony and balance and peace and love into a very harmful or very fear-based and scary-looking condition and situation. Mm-hmm. So we're being sovereign.
So even in that situation, I think about social media. So let's go back to the bombings in Paris. And even in social media, when we say post a picture, blessing Paris or sending love and light, even that act of doing that is putting energy to that attack.
I agree.
And so that it's such a fine line. I typically I won't post anything about sending that energy because I don't want to send any energy to that event. What I feel my responsibility is to put myself in a place of love and happiness and joy. And it probably is totally unrelated to what's happening in the world. But by keeping myself in that place of joy or happiness, that's what I contribute out to the world, and that's what I give out to the world, and that's what I think is my responsibility versus feeling responsible of sending light and love to a situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, either way, it's going to be fine. I think the example you said that's not necessary. The individuals who are doing that, they're in victim. Unfortunately, they are responding from victim consciousness. That's why it's happening.
And I even struggle sometimes saying that, because we're taught as healers and light workers, we're taught to send love to it, send light to it. And most recently, the angels and guides have been saying, just be in a place of love and light. You don't even have to send anything anywhere because you've just charged that event. and I say, well, I don't want to charge that event. I don't want to put any energy into that event. So the messages that I'm getting from my loved ones and guides are just my sole responsibility is just to be in that state of happiness. And I think that's a shift for some light workers that might be listening to this tonight and say, hey, wait a minute. we've been working for years about sending love and light. And so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on that and just
well, we're going in a new paradigm, so all these things, no matter what our views of what we've been doing, we have to allow the opportunity for that to change.
Yeah, and it's that social responsibility. I mean, as a healer, I feel like I have some social responsibility to my contribution to the energy field, but it's more important that, and the big message I guess that they're pushing through tonight as I'm listening to them and as I'm channeling is that be in your own space, be in your own happiness, be in your own force field, and share that out in its beauty, and then everything else takes care of itself. The energy flows quite naturally, so which is very different. It kind of means we don't have to do anything other than to just be responsible for ourselves.
That is true, and that's the direction that we're all meant to be headed. And as we practice that and see the results, then all of a sudden big changes can occur without our consciously knowing it, because we are affecting people wherever they may be, who are at that same level. And we have to look at it that way. We're just being a conduit, and we don't, like you say, don't need to specifically send it in any particular area. But you can at times too if you feel it's going to be helpful.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the numerous clients that, and I'm sure you have clients too that are struggling with family members that are going through hard times, or kids that are going through hard times, and they always ask, well, what can I do to help? What can I do to help them? And to be honest, in the past, I've told these clients to send them love and light, and just tonight in this discussion. So we are back online. Mark and I got disconnected with some electrical charge that we experienced as we were talking about the collective consciousness, so we're back online here. So a couple more points that I just wanted to make tonight before we close up this topic was we talked about what individuals can do and how an individual can impact the collective. But let's give our listeners just a few pointers about what we can do on a more collective basis. Group meditation is good. group yoga, those things that put us more into community. We collectively charge up or we ramp up the energy of those around us. What are some other ones that you do or you recommend to your clients?
Well, going out on the land with more than one person it always enhances the experience for the others. Kind of needing to be in a similar, let's say, consciousness state with others is helpful versus being having too much of a dramatic difference in the participants. That's really a factor as well. Like it or not, like-minded energies are going to flow more easily than conflicting energies, even if you're going, trying to pursue the same goal. And I'm thinking, those are just the typical things you would do. You would have a group visualization, group meditation, going online. I think we mentioned that too. There's personalities who have regular, we'll call them podcasts, I guess, and you could have thousands of people listening, and you're just following along with the guidance and the invocations of that particular personality, and that's another way that a collective energy of a collective group of people can contribute something. And and nowadays with of course, our interconnectedness with our technology, doing something in remote areas, but doing it at the same time through that one source, that one channel, is very effective.
Even on the recorded podcast, even if you listen to it later at different times, you're still contributing to the energy of the overall. For those that listened previous or those that are yet to listen to it, we contribute. I often tell people too, that's also the importance of doing ceremony, let's say on a new moon or a full moon, because there are people all over the world that are also doing ceremony, and so you're contributing, you're combining all the energies of people celebrating, new moon or full moon, or even let's say Christmas or 4th of July. You're in that flow of energy. So those group activities are really important, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, because it's being sent out with more magnification in a sense, and that would be just that simple amount of dynamic you're contributing to. And once again, you have to have that unified purpose in order for it to be the most effective.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about those group activities is a reminder to our listeners that we're not on this journey alone. We are as individuals, and as we talked earlier, we've got individual responsibility to our own personal development and contribution, but there are groups, masses going through the ascension process and the evolution process, and so that's what makes the symptoms or the experiences interesting, because when there's masses of people having the same experiences, the symptoms of ascension and the breakthroughs, and I feel that's where we are now also, is we're hitting some of these breakthroughs as a group or as a collective. And I think we're going to be experiencing more of those breakthroughs. And 2016 is tremendously transformative, and we're seeing more groups step forward, and more individuals are wanting to speak about the collective light, higher consciousness, energy, those types of things.
Totally in agreement, and I have experienced that many times with the life I live here.
Particularly, I would imagine, particularly being in Sedona is such a spiritual place, you see the shift there, but then the quick shift with people that are coming to the land there. They're experiencing a fast evolution because they're stepping in the middle of a collective group of consciousness or a collective energy there.
Yeah, and you're right. I have a very good laboratory platform to observe that, because they are coming up from other parts of the country. Sometimes they're coming straight up from Phoenix that same day, and the shift is so dramatic and quick. It's almost amusing be, and here me and my fellow Sedonats are living in this vibration, and you tend to forget and take it for granted until you're with somebody who's not from here. And even my house, even my yard, when people come to visit or stop over from outside the area, they're just blown away with the energies, and I'm sitting there going, well, I live in this every day. I'm just not as aware of it.
Right.
But when I leave Sedona, I definitely feel the difference.
Right. Yeah, and well, in my home, my whole house is a crystal home, so it's high frequency, and I have my own portal in my backyard. But I get similar experience when people they'll want to come here and meet, or they want to stay. They say, can we just stay here because the energy. So people are becoming more sensitive to the energy, and I think that's a beautiful thing when people can recognize, say, for example, your home or the land that they're on as being very pivotal to their experience.
It is. I guess, it's just geomagnetics too, and you just create a force field, and you keep feeding it. Eventually, it's like a vortex. It just will consistently provide that particular frequency. If it's like 432, or if it's 523 or 528, whatever it's programmed to, and so it's beneficial for maybe a deeper experience.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. Speaking of numbers, I just wanted to touch base on, I've had a lot of questions in the last couple of weeks about people seeing 555, and 555 is an angelic number. It's about change, and that's why I have to believe that we're experiencing huge amounts of change, and coming back to our earlier discussion about the planets, everything is in alignment for us to go through these portals, go through these thresholds of change in preparation for the next level of change, because we're really never done going through change. There's early adapters that are experiencing the energy shifts right now, and they'll continue to carry the torch and be the champions for the next level of frequency. We talk a lot about we're in the fifth dimension, but it's then going into the sixth dimension or seventh dimension, or oftentimes I work in higher consciousness or higher dimensions as I do readings with people. So I'm really excited to see what this later this year is going to be as we continue to move through these retrogrades and the planet shifts and the energies kind of calm down a little bit for us. See where we come out on the other side.
Yeah, like first week of November.
the first week of November. I haven't even thought that far ahead. I want to get through this. The eclipses in September are going to be pretty challenging. But you're talking about the election.
Yeah, because that's going to be seeing the most vitriolic, venomous presidential campaign we probably have ever experienced in our lifetimes.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of those opportunities that I would say, an opportunity for us to, as a collective energy, to tune that out, or to not focus on that, or not to contribute to that energy.
Well, it's a great opportunity to do, to practice what we've been saying, and to respect everybody's, each other's views and opinions, because that's what's going to be the trigger point for whatever's going to happen down the road in the next 5 months, is the resistance of not respecting each other's views, and insisting with righteousness that we are right in our perspective. It's a great test. It's a great opportunity to actually get past that.
Right. As a collective, as a country,
as a globe. We're supposed to be democratic, and therefore that means everyone has a right to vote and choose the way they feel best suits them and their personal need.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely right. It's going to be an interesting year ahead. So an opportunity for us to practice all those
principles we've been mentioning for the last hour.
Absolutely. So with that, I think it's time to close out for the night and thank our listeners for once again joining us. I'm Laurie Wondra with Your Life.
Your Life
Your
Core.
Sorry, there's so much energy floating around. Laurie Wondra with Your Life Core and Mark Griffon with Sedona Mystical Tours. We got that right?
Yeah, and we could thank Mercury for reminding us that it's still not finished with us.
Yeah, and the static as I'm looking at a couple computers in front of me that are both still struggling in the energy here that we are. So I want to thank our listeners and from the archangels, the ascended masters, and all their helpers, and for you, Mark, you and I, may all the dimensions of our energy, our physical, our mental, our emotional, our etheric fields, they be fully open and be infused with sustainable frequency of love, peace, joy, happiness, abundance, and compassion. And may you call in the helpers of the universe to support and help you. And with those universal helpers, we send you beams of light and love from the universe.